Welcome, everyone. We're really excited to be here today to talk a little bit about women identity. We're really passionate about this, so hopefully that comes through the screen. Women Identity is a registered nonprofit membership organization. It's run completely by volunteers, and the purpose is to promote parity within respect to opportunity, reward, recognition, and professional mobility in the identity space. And we look all across the spectrum of what that could mean, looking at gender, intersectionality, race, ability, ethnicity, sexual orientation, identity, creed, age, and social status. So, really looking across all the different ways that we can bring unique aspects to identity.
What is bias? Bias, prejudice, mean a strong inclination of the mind or a preconceived opinion about something or someone. A bias may be favorable or unfavorable, bias in favor of or against an idea. Let's face it, we all have biases. You are biased, I am biased, we all are biased.
Here we have a quote by Anatole France from Le Petit Pierre. And luckily, this is a global conference because when we shared this slide in Canada, I felt like I had to pronounce the French, but I really was bad at it. But all of the definitions of man, the worst is that he is a rational animal. So we want to start picking that apart. And first of all, it's not just man. In this, it means human. Back in 1918, when Mr. France wrote this, he was even, thinking of, would this be perceived as, just man, not women, not somebody who doesn't feel like they fit in either of those spaces. But we're looking at, how things have changed over time. And we have bias, as Nicole mentioned. And bias can be good. Maybe the man who's spearfishing, maybe he didn't eat the tart berries because he didn't like the bitterness, and it was good because they were actually poisonous, but he preferred the sweet strawberries or raspberries or something like that. So bias can be good. It can be, something that we favor, and maybe there's a reason that we favor it. It can also be terrible. We can also greatly overlook groups of people and not exclude them, whether intentional or on purpose, just because maybe that's not the frame of mind that we're in or that the space that we fall in. So bias can also be terrible, and we want to make sure that we are representing everyone as systems built for everyone are built by everyone.
Absolutely. So on the next slide here, you'll notice that there is a video. I'm not certain if it's going to play, but we have two scenarios here, and I would like to just break those down. So in the first part, there's a video. This whole video is actually from the Facebook offices in San Francisco, and it was taken by an employee who tried to use the soap dispenser. The footage actually shows that the soap dispenser dispenses soap for a white hand in the video or the photos in showcasing in scenario 1, or even a white tissue showcased in scenario 2, number 2, but not for a black hand, which shows it was not tested to work with darker skin tones. So when we don't think about biases in product development, this is what actually can go wrong, and it's a representation of that.
So here are two pictures that Nicole and I actually presented with Melissa Carvalho, who is the Canadian Ambassador for Women Identity, back in March. And we got a lot of questions off these pictures and types of pictures like this. So on the left, we have passport facial recognition checks fail to work with dark skin. And on the right, we have somebody whose eyes were flagged as being closed when they're clearly open in the picture because it didn't meet the criteria for a scanner. And we talked about this, and we really talked about, people coded these biases in, whether they meant to or not. I would like to think that they didn't, but it still happened, and it's still, a really big issue. But people said, and I wanted to really avoid the term fake news, but they said, where did you get your news? Questioning Nicole and I, do we know how to use research articles, or are we making sure that this isn't somebody trying to prank us or play a trick? But they said this can't be real, that somebody overlooked, such large parts of our population. It is real though. So this is the BBC News is reporting this out of London, and we also have Reuters out of New Zealand. So we just want to show people this is something that really is happening. Like, we're missing huge segments of society.
Absolutely. So implications of bias in identity and security. There are two issues we face. One is how we actually bias affect the people who we are supposed to be using our systems to protect themselves and our businesses against bad actors, but also the bad actors themselves. The cyber threats we face are instigated by those from all walks of life when we think about it, and deployed by all those with varying skill levels. So if we consider this from different cultural, class, and economic backgrounds, how do we ensure our industry can continue to stand up to these threats? We need to make sure that the teams we put in place can actually fight them and are just as diverse to do so. If you are involved in the design and development of security systems, ask yourself honestly, are you testing our solutions on people who will use them? And are we really thinking about the people that pose threats to our businesses? It's a really, really big question that we need to consider.
Next up, we're going to look at a few different scenarios. So we have somebody who designed, I'll say, a tablet. So they created this tablet, and there's a username and password on it. And we have this cute little smiling girl, and she's going to use the tablet. And, I feel like 7 or 8 months ago, we tried to keep the kids off the tablet, and now it's kind of like, oh, please just use the tablet for 5 minutes while you're home at school. But anyhow, so this girl, she's going to use the tablet, and how is she going to enter the password? I feel like kids think so differently than us. Last night I was doing kindergarten French homework, and I'm really bad at it, as I mentioned earlier. And I had my daughter going through and pronouncing letters, and we were spelling words like a decoder in English, and she was saying, pay, ooh, pay, you get. We're spelling puppy, and she said, wait a second, Mom. You spelled puppy in English, but that's not the French word. And I was like, oh, like, you're processing this. I'm just trying to make a game, but you really get it. However, then I move over to have her, look at the magic school bus or whatever on her tablet. She can't remember the code for anything. I was going to show you what I'm using right now. It's a device. I've nicely covered up the logos with stickers, but I was having trouble with my work computer, so I can't show you. But it's, she has to log in with an email address, username, and password. So I'm stuck with, okay, in order to get her on her own account and not on my account, but not a guest account, so she has everything she needs downloaded, how do I get her to remember the email and the password, but also, having an email out there with an unsecure password has its own issues too. So just trying to think of what the user is like and how are they using it. That one I know a lot about, but I would say that this is one I'm passionate about. So we have this user here. This user has different abilities than perhaps you or I may have, and he's using his device. So this user aside, we look at people on a broad spectrum of how they may be able to use their mobile devices or any sort of computing device they're using, and the extent to which they use it. So I know my family does something called disabled sailing, where we take people out in modified boats, and they get to get on the water, and it's literally about leaving their chair on the dock. And there are different devices so they can do this based on their abilities. Some of them have full ability in their arms and they're doing the rigging themselves. Others have specialized devices where they're controlling a whole boat with their mouth. It's really awesome and amazing that technology can help us do this. But what about something simple like using the phone? Some would have a hard time holding the phone up to see their face. At the same time, it might be difficult to punch in their password. They use the phones all the time. They're using them to grab their cabs to get down to the dock, call a family member when they're done to come pick them up. And we think about this, how secure is that device on whatever they're using for their mobility? I'd like to say that bad actors would leave that segment of society alone. It's probably not reality, though. How secure, like physically, is their device, not just, in terms of internet security, but if they also have their mobile banking or something like that on their phone, like it really needs to be locked down tight. So just so many things to think about. And it's hard because like I can look at it and I can say, oh, I thought about this, but not having that experience as a user and not getting it firsthand from somebody who deals with this every day, like I'm still missing 1 million things that need to be considered. And then we have, different generations using things different. So we looked at the one end of the spectrum. How do I get my kid on the device without bothering me every 5 seconds to log into the password because she's accidentally clicked out of it? What about this one? So I know at the beginning of the pandemic, we actually stayed with my mother-in-law, and like so many other people, she actually had to make the shift to online banking for the first time. Now she lives out in the countryside. The internet is miserable, to be completely honest. It's cutting out all the time. So there's never really any need for her to do online banking. She then asked me to help her set up her online banking, and she's like, Shanda, you work at a bank. You must know how to do this. I have no idea how to do this. I think Nicole's in the same boat where every account that we've opened up on our own, it's always come with like the online banking attached. It's been part of our banking experience. So how nervous was I to go in and try and create her online banking profile, clicking around and clicking through things. The banks have done an amazing job of making it easy and clear cut. I know that RBC, for example, has instructions now. And they also have like prioritized lines and stuff like that for seniors, as do a lot of the other banks. So that's really helpful. At the beginning, of course, I was afraid, okay, what if I click the wrong link? Or what if this is like a spoof site and I'm going to sign my mother-in-law up and she's going to then, lose her life savings and be living with me in our one-bedroom apartment. Just like, maybe irrational thoughts, but they're real. They're very real and they're very plausible scenarios in reality, unfortunately. Then we come to this leaf slide. Everybody wants to know about the leaf slide. And I think the obvious thing here is we're all different. And, there's so much beauty in the differences. These leaves are all very reminiscent of what I see right outside. But if they were all homogenous, they'd all look the same. The picture wouldn't be as wonderful. And just like leaves and humans, like we're all different. In the way we think and see and do things. It comes from maybe our cultural background. It can be, where we live. I know that I grew up in a rural community and the experience was very different from the urban community. And when I was first out of school, I worked at a place that was doing lending software, and they were focusing on the Canadian plains and like farmers and stuff like that. And this would have been in around 2011, 12. And they were saying like, okay, so the farmers, like all they have to do is pick up their smartphones and just tap like this and they're pre-approved for the loan. And it's great. They don't even need to take the day off to come into the city and, talk about what they need next. And I was just thinking of my dad, and he's come a really long way. But in 2011, 2012, if I had asked him to use a smartphone to do something like that, he would probably toss it in like the hay baler and like hope it crushes. So we need to think about people and just all the different users and the way that they're using our technology. And it might not be obvious if we don't have that experience.
Absolutely. And not just thinking of it from the customer perspective, but from, our team. So take a look at this slide here. When you are looking for teamwork and problem solving, you need diversity. If you end up with a very homogenous team, they'll become a team really fast. but then they'll hit a plateau of ability, and then they'll get stuck in groupthink. They will literally think the same way. You need to have the diversity of gender, sex, race, of age, so that you can problem solve better. So to protect these end users and the organizations that we represent, I think cybersecurity teams must be reflective of a wider workforce. Failure to build diverse teams can lead to a narrow-minded approach to threat detection, cause dangerous assumptions in the end user knowledge, and facilitate poor decision-making. A team made up of older, more experienced cybersecurity professionals, for example, could assume that the younger digitally native generation has an innate understanding of common cyber threats. However, we know this is not always the case, actually. Research shows baby boomers and Gen X workers, those aged between 38 and 53, have a much stronger understanding of common threats such as phishing and ransomware, likely due to longer term exposure to and training around these topics. So we really have to kind of keep everything and consider everything actually at the forefront. So let's go to the next slide. Now I ask you today, what can you do today? Firstly, you can accept that you are biased, accept that your teams are biased, accept that the lack of diversity is a threat, and design your security products with diversity in mind, diversity by design. Let's face it, diversity challenges traditional assumptions and thought processes, bringing a fresh perspective to old problems as well as to new challenges. That's key. The more we include new and varied viewpoints, evolved from different life experiences and backgrounds, the better informed our industry becomes, and the more equipped we are to respond to an increasingly diverse threat landscape. If we're to have any chance of closing this gap and mitigating that risk, we need to cast our net far and wide, really. Not just to make up the numbers, but to build teams capable of protecting the increasingly diverse workforce from increasingly diverse threats. This is not just a box ticking exercise for the sake of equality. Lack of diversity in our industry has far-reaching consequences that could put the organizations we strive to protect at risk. And it's very important that we consider this from not only the internal, but to the external. Next slide, please.
We started out with a quote from Anatole France, and I think it's nice to end with a more positive one by the same author. But to accomplish great things, we must not only act, but also dream, and not only plan, but also believe. Huge thank you to our corporate sponsors who've kind of been there year after year, coming back and making this an opportunity and making it a reality.
Absolutely. And if you would like to join us or find out more, please look to the following and connect with us. We would love to connect with you and talk further about all the opportunities we have.
And with that, we'll look over to see if there are any questions.